Hey guys, welcome to the Loft Sports. We're going to be shooting some videos and giving you our take on sports at all levels, college, professional, football, basketball, baseball. My name is Tyler.
My name's Seth.
We both graduated from the University of Nebraska in Lincoln. We both grew up there, went to high school together. I actually happen to be an avid Notre Dame fan, however.
And as you can see, I'm all about my Nebraska Cornhuskers.
We actually both live in North Carolina right now, though, currently, so we're pretty well versed on sports, mostly college football and college basketball, but we'll be bringing you some other takes from the NFL and other sports, etc., etc. So this is our introduction, and we hope you guys enjoy the videos. All right, guys, welcome to the first episode of Loft Sports. Today we're going to be looking at the beginning of our college football videos. We're going to go over the Power 5 conferences, and then at the end, Seth and I will give our playoff predictions. Today we're going to start with the Big Ten.
The Big Ten.
All right, so we're going to start ahead and dive right in here. We're going to go over some of the headlines leading into the 2019 college football season. Seth, why don't you go ahead and take it away?
Yeah, I think you and I are pretty much in agreement with these. It's probably a standard across national perspective. Number one is this finally the year that Jim Harbaugh takes that next step as Michigan's head coach. Then you have Ohio State without Urban Meyer. What are they going to look like? The Fields is supposed to be a great quarterback coming in. We'll see. And the last big headline for me, not because I'm a homer or anything like that, but I think everyone's interested to see what Scott Frost does at Nebraska. Can he replicate anywhere to the same success he had in his second year at UCF?
Yep, those are the big headlines. So we'll go ahead now, and I think the first thing we need to talk about is the most important games that will shape this conference. And of course, before you get into conference play, you have pretty large-scale non-conference games. For me, I think the biggest game in the Big Ten this year, featuring a Big Ten team against a non-conference team, not because I'm a homer, but Michigan against Notre Dame. Notre Dame was a playoff team last year. A lot of people like Michigan to make the playoff this year. We all know about Jim Harbaugh and his struggles against Michigan State and more so Ohio State, but he's also 0-1 against Notre Dame, and Michigan fans will know that Notre Dame is one of their biggest rivals, and that is a big check mark that he's going to have to hurdle. They get Notre Dame at home. It's a little non-traditional. It's later in the season. It's not early in the year like normal, so it'll be a little interesting to see how healthy both teams are coming into that game.
Yeah, I mean, discussing that, it's Michigan, Notre Dame. Not much else needs to be said. If you're a college football fan, those are the games you mark on your calendar at the beginning of every year, the games you live for.
A couple others that will make the list. Not a lot of really intriguing matchups that feature Big Ten teams.
Yeah.
Ohio State's not even playing a Power 5 team. Neither is Wisconsin. But Iowa State and Iowa are going to meet up. That's a really interesting game for me because that's two middle-of-the-road teams, two teams that are kind of on the same level in terms of conference alignment. Another big one is Northwestern travels out west to take on Stanford early in the year.
Probably two preseason top 25 teams.
Yep, Northwestern won the West last year. Stanford's always in contention in what's probably the second or third toughest division in college football, which is the Pac-12 North. And then the last one I had on the list was Arizona State at Michigan State.
Yep.
A lot of people high on Michigan State this year. A lot of returners on defense.
Yeah, I'm one of those people. You'll see a little bit more of that later on here, but I think Michigan State really like their team. It's going to be a good test to see kind of what they do earlier in the year against a Power 5 team, see if that offense is any better. That's the big question for them.
And Herm Edwards in his second year at Arizona State. Arizona State actually beat a top 15 Michigan State team last year out in the desert, so a little bit of a revenge game there. So those are the biggest non-conference games. Let's go ahead and dive into the biggest conference games. I think we can all agree on number one.
I mean, Ohio State, Michigan, that's one of the biggest games every single year, whether Michigan's been down in the last 5-10 years. Still, Ohio State, Michigan, that's just up there with Notre Dame, Michigan. I mean, that's one of the games as a college football fan you live for. A lot of people say that's the best college football game every single year, the best rivalry. So that, of course, that's number one.
Number two, I think we both can agree on, or at least in contention, Michigan and Michigan State. Jim Harbaugh has beat Michigan State, but he has not yet done it at home. And I think Michigan State is going to be a sneaky team this year. It might be flying under the radar. When you think Big Ten East, a lot of people talk Ohio State, Michigan. don't sleep on Sparty.
Yeah.
The years where people kind of write them off are the years when they're most dangerous, and they're actually really not being wrote off by a lot of people.
Yeah.
They got a really good defense. They got a quarterback that's got a couple years under his belt. You know they're going to play good football. They're not going to beat themselves. So I think that's another.
And I think you and I can both agree on this. Mark D'Antonio, what he does there speaks for itself. Don't ever count that man out.
Another big game in the Big Ten this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily going to be one of the absolute biggest. It's not going to decide a division or anything like that. But Ohio State comes to Nebraska earlier on in the year. That's going to be Fields' first big test. And I can tell you, Nebraska, that fan base is desperate. They're going to be wild for that game. Good chance game day will be there too if both teams are undefeated. Nebraska's got an early tilt against Colorado earlier in the year, but if they get past that, setting up for a game day atmosphere, which hasn't happened in Lincoln, Nebraska in a long time, those fans will be ready.
And speaking of Nebraska and Lincoln, Wisconsin comes in there. I think that's the game that's probably going to decide the Western Division. Freshman quarterback for Wisconsin on the road. They do return Jonathan Taylor and some of their studs on the defensive line and defensive side of the ball in a whole, but that's probably going to be the decisive game in the West for me.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and give you guys our standings. We're going to start in the Big Ten West, and we're going to start from the bottom and work our way up. We're not going to focus as much on these teams toward the bottom. We're in kind of agreement on a few of these teams that might be one or two headlines, but they're probably not going to have seasons that their fan bases are going to want to remember. So number 7 in the West, I think you and I both have this team finishing last. That's Illinois.
Yeah, I mean, Illinois, they've been one of the worst teams last couple years. Not much to be said there other than that. Lovie Smith was a great coach, and the NFL hasn't quite got the same success going at Illinois. Probably going to be his last year there, in all honesty. Illinois is just a tough for him right now as a program.
Number 6 in the West for me, I think a lot of people are saying this team could potentially win 10 games, and I don't disagree with that. But I think this is more of a standpoint of me not being a big fan of their coach and thinking he's a little overrated. I actually have Minnesota finishing second to last. I think they'll go 5-7. I don't even think they'll make a bowl game. They got a tough road trip to Fresno early in the year.
Yeah, I mean, Minnesota, P.J. Fleck, I know he's got good success, comes in with a lot of hype. I'm in agreement with you there. I don't think he's very good of a coach, or at least at the level other people think he is. I know Minnesota's a tough place to get talent to, but when Jerry Kill was there, he proved that a good coach can come in and win games there. I just don't think it's P.J. Fleck. I have him number 6 as well.
Number 5, I think we start to differ here. I actually have Iowa. I think they'll win 7 games and make it to a bowl, and they do return some players on both sides of the ball, but I'm not as high on Iowa. I think they kind of have this hot-cold thing. Mm-hmm. When people are starting to put some expectations on them, they seem to not meet those, so I have Iowa finishing 5th in the division this year.
Number 5, a team that I think surprised a lot of people last year in Purdue. I don't necessarily think they take a next step. I think they stay right where they are. Replacing quarterbacks, always tough. Jeff Brom is a heck of a coach, though. Give him a couple more years to get more of his guys in there, more guys like a Rondell Moore, who I think we can both agree is one of the more electric players in the country. He's going to do things, and him by himself, he can upset a team. I mean, just give him the ball and see what happens. But I still don't see it happening for him. Big picture in the Big Ten, I have them coming in at number 5.
They're actually my number 4 team. I agree with what he just said. The good thing for Purdue is that their quarterback, although they lose David Blau, Sindler, I believe is how you say his name, he is going to be back. He did have some reps last season and played in some key moments for Purdue, so it's not like he's inexperienced. Purdue has a friendly schedule, and although they only return 3 starters on the offensive side of the ball, I think they return as many as 8 on defense. And I think Jeff Brom is a very good coach, and I think Purdue is going to win 8 games this year and surprise some people.
In my number 4 spot in the West, I have Iowa. I mean, Iowa's just one of those teams. They're solid every year. They usually have perennially one of the best lines, both sides of the ball. I think that carries them. I think this year more than any, they're lacking in the skill department, and I think that's what's going to keep them down. Offensively, I can't even tell you a receiver they have other than, is it Smith Marset?
I believe so.
Yeah, Smith Marset. Hawkinson and Fant, their 2 main tight ends, were gone last year. I know they reload at the tight end spot. It's just not enough proof yet for me to suggest anything higher than 4th for them.
Number 3 on my list is the team that actually won the division last year, and that's Northwestern. This team is one you can't just write off because they will find a way to win a game. You don't think they have the talent or the business to win. They do have some tough road games, but I also think that they can win on the road. They've proven that. I think they'll win 8 games. I think they lose to Stanford early in the year, but I think they finish 6-3 in the conference, and I think that's good enough for 3rd place for them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you right there. I have Northwestern number 3. A lot of the same stuff you mentioned. They were there last year. They have a great culture. And to me, pound for pound, talent for talent, probably the best coach in the conference. I don't know another coach that gets more out of his guys than Pat Fitzgerald. Definitely one of my favorites. I just don't see them having more than a 3rd place finish this year.
I think that's fair. Number 2 and 1 for me and you are going to be flip-flopped.
Yep.
I have Nebraska finishing 2nd and Wisconsin winning the division. Real quick, though, I actually have the top 4 teams all finishing with a 6-3 record in the conference, and because of the way the tiebreakers shift out, I actually think Wisconsin will win the West, even though Nebraska will beat them. Because of the ties, it won't just come down to the head-to-head, and I think that'll be the way Wisconsin finds its way into Indianapolis.
Yeah, and I mean, those are my top 2 as well. I just have them flip-flopped. I have Nebraska winning the West, Wisconsin 2nd. I think this is that year. When you look at a team, the first thing I always do is who is their quarterback. Nebraska is Adrian Martinez coming back for a sophomore year 2 in Scott Frost's system. You know what he's done with quarterbacks in the past. Marcus Mariota, Mackenzie Milton, both of them finished in the Heisman voting their last years with them. Adrian Martinez, no different, all the potential in the world. Big question for me is in this conference, it's about defense to win divisions. Is that defense going to be good enough? Last year, obviously wasn't the case. I think the biggest area Nebraska needs to improve on to win the West, and I think they have, which is why I have them picked, is I think they're in the trenches. They're finally catching up to the Wisconsins, Iowa, Northwesterns in that division. To be honest, before Scott Frost came, there wasn't a whole lot of strength and conditioning going on, which is sad to say, but that's been supposedly the news out of Lincoln. That's all been corrected. Players' bodies have changed. I think you'll see a different Nebraska in the trenches, and I think that's the difference when they finally win the West.
I think it's also important to note that Wisconsin got a much tougher draw with their schedule.
Yeah.
They have to go to Ohio State. Of course, they have to go to Nebraska. They also play Michigan State in a crossover game. So Nebraska's biggest games are all at home. Ohio State, Wisconsin, and Iowa. They don't have to play Michigan, Michigan State, or Penn State from the East. So I think that's why a lot of people like Nebraska. All right, so moving from the West into the East, we'll start at the bottom just like we did for the West. I think you and I are in agreement here on who's going to finish in the cellar in the East, and we both have Rutgers there.
Yeah, I mean, Rutgers, enough said. What else really needs to be said about them? They've been one of the worst programs the last 2-3 years in the country. I don't even think they've gotten over 3 wins the last few years, so yeah, 7 for them.
I think they lost to Kansas a couple of years ago, too. So it's
Right.
been a pretty rough stretch of seasons for them. Number 6 in the East, I think we have the same team here as well. That's Indiana.
Yep, Indiana just a little bit better than Rutgers, but still they're not going to challenge anything. They play a couple teams close every year, but they're just not a winning program. 6 is probably where they're going to fall.
Yeah, I think they usually give Michigan a tough game, but I agree. I don't think they're going to do much better than 6th. Number 5, I have Maryland. Team that's kind of gotten off to a hot start the last couple of years. They beat Texas twice in a row. I think they were even ranked for a little bit after one of those upsets. But they just haven't been able to put it together for 2 stretches of a season. I have them finishing 5th here.
Yeah, I mean, Maryland's got good talent. They've had a couple receivers, running backs, some skill guys go to the NFL last few years. They recruit well. They have some talent in their area. So, I mean, they do recruit well for where their program's at. It's still not enough, though. I think you're in agreement with me here. In the Big Ten East, there's a top 4, and then there's the rest. And Maryland is going to be the best of those rests, just kind of the bottom seller of that division.
I agree. Number 4, team that's been on the fringe and even won the Big Ten a few years ago, but I think you're going to see them take a step back this year, and that's Penn State. They lose Trace McSorley, veteran quarterback. I think they're going to have the talent. James Franklin, there's no question in my mind he's a great recruiter, but I have some questions about his in-game coaching ability. Penn State's been close a couple of times to knocking off Ohio State, but they just haven't been able to get over the hump since they pulled off the upset a few years ago. I think they're going to finish 7-5, so a respectable year to some degree, but not near what Penn State fans probably want.
Yeah, I mean, Penn State, I think the main thing, it starts with McSorley. They've kind of been on a downward swing since they lost Saquon Barkley to the NFL. Now this year they're losing McSorley. Their backup who came in and he's played a little bit last couple of years, I believe he's transferred out of the program. So really, it's kind of a rebuilding job for them this year. It's kind of, I think, going to be a low point in the James Franklin era with looking ahead to the future because, like you said, he does recruit well. I'm sure he'll have them back up there competing again, but I think you're going to see some bigger margin of losses, some closer wins. Teams that don't normally give them trouble this year. I have them fourth as well.
Number 3 for me might be a little bit of a surprise, but I have Ohio State. I do think they get to 10 wins. I think they will lose 2 games. I think both of those losses will come at home to Michigan and I take that back, at Michigan, but I think they'll lose at home to Michigan State. Fields is a great player, played a little bit at his time at Georgia. He's obviously a highly recruited quarterback. There's no question he's going to make plays. But I think the biggest thing concerning me for Ohio State is when Urban Meyer is gone, you take a top 5 coach out of the equation, whether it's preparation, in the film study. I think that X factor of Urban Meyer's presence is now gone. I think Ohio State will naturally take a step back, but they do have the talent to compete for a national championship even without Urban Meyer. But I think new quarterback, new coach, 10-2 sounds right to me.
At number 3 for me, I got a big surprise here, I think, to most. I actually have Michigan finishing 3rd in the division. I think Michigan State and Ohio State get them this year, and I think there's always that sneaky loss. I was doing some research on it. Michigan currently is 1-18 against ranked teams on the road. They have a trip to Madison that I think is early enough in the year. I think it's going to trip them up. I think they lose that one. I got them losing to Michigan State and Ohio State as well. And with those 2 teams being as good as they are, I think that's a 3rd place finish.
Okay. My number 2 is actually Michigan State. I think Michigan State is going to have one of the best defenses in this conference. They return a lot. Michigan State's always given Michigan trouble. They do have to play at Ohio State and at Michigan, but I actually think they win both of those games and they lose to Northwestern and at Wisconsin, so that keeps them out of the title game. But I like MSU at number 2.
Yeah, I mean, number 2, I have Michigan State there as well. I think the main thing with them is its defense in D'Antonio. I think they're going to carry it. Their offense is going to be a little bit more improved this year. They don't need that great of an offense with that defense. Lewerke has enough experience. D'Antonio's best years have been with an experienced quarterback and a great defense. That formula's there. I think they finish 2.
For number 1 for me, I actually have Michigan. They do have some tough games. They have to go to Madison. They have Notre Dame and Ohio State at home and Michigan State. But I think this year Michigan gets it done. I do think they lose to Michigan State, and I think they'll lose to Notre Dame, but that's not a conference game. So I think that's enough to get them over the hump, and I think this is finally the year that Michigan beats a really good Ohio State team. Their only win against Ohio State since 2004 is their win over Ohio State when Urban Meyer was right before Luke Fickell's intern year. So Ohio State was terrible. I think Michigan gets it done and wins the East.
For me, the East winner, I have it Ohio State. I know Urban Meyer's gone, but I think it's business as usual there. There's not a team in this conference more prepared to reload that recruits at a higher level. They got a Justin Fields coming in. I really don't see it being too much difference. I wasn't a big fan of Haskins. I thought he was a little overrated, and he had a great year for him last year. I think their offense is even going to be better. They're going to reload. Yes, Urban's gone, and some of that day-to-day game management's not going to be there. I think they're still good enough to win the East, though.
So who do you have winning the conference championship?
For me, I actually have Ohio State winning the conference. I don't have them representing the Big Ten in the playoff. I don't think they have the Big Ten has a playoff team this year. But I think I'll have Ohio State over Nebraska. I do think Nebraska is going to beat them earlier in the year, though. I do. I think that's just going to be a tough game for Ohio State. then Ohio State avenges that loss in Indianapolis.
Okay, I actually have Michigan beating Wisconsin for the second time. This will be in Indy as opposed to their road game at Madison. I think Wisconsin, with their running game and Jonathan Taylor and their defense, get to Indy. Like we said about the tiebreakers in the West, I think the top 4 teams, Wisconsin, Nebraska, Northwestern, and Purdue, all finished 6-3. Nebraska beats Wisconsin, but because of the tiebreakers, I got Wisconsin coming out of the West. I got Michigan winning, but I think that's still the Big Ten because I have Michigan losing to Notre Dame and Michigan State. I agree, 4 straight years in a row, almost unbelievably, no Big Ten in the playoff. Yeah. So that's our Big Ten thoughts. I think the Big Ten is one of the best conferences. I think it has some of the best teams. I think Phil Steele has like 4 or 5 Big Ten teams in his top 25. I personally haven't done a top 25 yet, but I probably will have somewhere around a handful as well. It's a great conference, great coaches, great teams, but I think when they beat up on each other, a 2-loss Big Ten champ's going to be left out.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing hurting the Big Ten, it's kind of helping them with TV deals and more on the business side of things, but they do play a 9-game schedule. The SEC does not. I think that makes it easier for there to be 2 SEC teams in the playoff like there seems to be every year. You're probably going to see that again this year, to be honest. We'll get into that later in a couple other videos down the line here, but I'm with you. I think they beat up on each other. They're a great conference. I think they're going to have a good, when you get to how they stack up, have a good record in bowls, but I just don't think they're going to have a playoff team. I think the schedules, they just beat up on each other too much.
I agree, and they don't seem to have a lot of big games in the non-conference. Speaking of the SEC, that's actually going to be our next video here on Loft Sports. We're going to bring that to you probably sometime here in the next few days.